discussion, Compliance Under Transformation, Life Sciences and AI at the Crossroads, brings together leaders from across the life sciences industry to explore how regulatory reforms and AI-driven processes are reshaping compliance expectations. You'll hear perspectives on harmonizing global standards, future-proofing quality systems, and fostering innovation without creating new risks or surprises. Joining us are Salad Musali from Compliance Group, Cisco Vicente from Getinga, Michael Jacine from Smith & Nephew, and Craig Gassman from Vericel. Moderating today's conversation is Michelle Vuolo, Head of Quality at Tulip. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage.
They're gonna sit here. Okay, then you sit there. Okay, fine. Great. Can I have some of my sunglasses here?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm really excited. As you can see or heard, this panel of people really covers sort of the gamut from quality to IT to even an ex-regulator here. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I've spent my entire career in quality, and I've been thinking a lot lately about how I can characterize AI, right? And I came up with the fact that it's very similar to a teenager. So I don't know if any of you here have a teenager, have raised a teenager, maybe been a teenager once, but they can be a little crazy. They can kind of go off the rails without any guardrails. And sometimes you just don't understand them at all. So we're going to talk today about how life sciences can adopt AI. Maybe they can't. What are the issues we're seeing? What's the quality landscape out there? And maybe not just AI, but also just transformation and implementation of digital. So I'm going to first start by throwing out there where we think we are in industry today. And I'm just going to start right here. So, Craig, are we gung-ho, let's have at it, or absolutely no way?
So it depends who you ask. It depends what department you're working with at that moment in time, right? If you're working with regulatory or quality, they want to take a conservative stance on how you're going to implement and deploy any sort of AI technology. There's a lot of excitement around it, but to be able to, first you have to decide what are you going to use it for? What are the use cases, right? And then when you're working with the different functional teams that are going to help be part of an implementation or deployment, a lot of it is going to determine what you're going to be using it for at the end of the day. And there are a handful of different pathways of how you would do that. You would license software that has AI built in. You would use software that you're already using where the vendor is already trying to embed AI technologies. You can do something on a shoestring budget on your own, or you can work with a vendor and spend upwards of $300,000 on a proof of concept and see how that plays out, right? So there's a lot of different pathways, and what we're doing right now is more on a shoestring budget, where we have just licensed instance of enterprise-grade ChatGPT. 40 participants across the organization to really cast a wide net, cross-representation across the organization to see what can we use AI for day to day, but most importantly, where are the capabilities not there yet, right? And I think that's a big determining factor on future investment zones for an organization and how you can influence your executive team to open up the purse strings to give you more money in the next fiscal year to be able to spend more and invest more. But it's not just about figuring out where you want to use AI and then getting the right internal and external folks involved, but where is it not, where are the capabilities not today? So then you can steer clear of that and you can start to invest in capabilities that make sense today and really help people day to day.
So somewhere in the middle on that.
Somewhere in the middle.
Continuum. Mm-hmm. It's funny, you mentioned case studies, maybe proof of concepts. How about somebody else? Like as far as proof of concepts go, I know there's that sort of death by POC and never getting to actual value. Do you have some anecdotes, maybe Khaled?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me clear the room. My name is not Salad, it's Khaled. That's what ChatGPT. Hello, Khaled. So like DJ Khaled, okay. Khaled like Salad, okay? Anyway, moving on. All right. Use cases, yes, there's tons. And some of them, they just get stuck, right? And I'm not an AI guy. I used to be an IT guy. I'm a quality compliance guy. So first of all, every quality and compliance guy, they need to retool themselves somehow, right? We need to understand AI. We need to understand the technology, right? Before we actually reach out to anybody to teach us what AI is, right? We need to teach ourselves so we can verify/validate what these guys are telling us, because they can take us to the moon and back, but we're still in the basement. So lots of what we're seeing within my organization as we implement AI tools in terms of migration, in terms of translating, whatever it is, we get stuck at the POC, right? Why? It's cultural. There's a culture there that is holding us back. So my recommendation to this entire attendees here, you need to be open-minded. Again, remember the dot-com, you remember the internet back in the early 90s, right? We were all afraid of it, scared of it. AI, it's been there since back then. And I think we're not even at the middle of it. We're literally at the beginning of it from a new technology perspective. So we just need to accept the fact, right? Not to be afraid of these ex-former FDA guys, because that's what this guy is. But he's with us now. He's on our side, which is good, right? We need more of these ex-agency folks to join us to see the pain that we go through for them, right? We're still afraid of the agency. Oh, this is not enough. You're not showing me enough. Well, we should not be worried about what we're going to show the agency. We should really believe that what we're doing is the right thing, right? Again, the focus is always on patient safety, product quality, and data integrity. And I'm going to end it up with, who is familiar with CSA? Raise your hand, please. Okay, that's not enough hands. Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll talk about it later. Actually, Michelle will explain to you what computer software assurance, the lean validation, will take you from 1 year of validating a Tulip system anywhere to 3 months. Why? Michelle will explain later.
Yeah, I can do that. We can do that in between session over a cocktail later. So I want to move on to I've heard POC, and we're all talking about run towards it, bring in a company and figure out how to use it, right? That seems a little forced to me. So what I want to know is there true value as vice president of quality for a medical device company? What do you see? Is this something your company has mandated? We have to use AI in everything we can, or are you seeing actual value or places where you can find value, both for the customer, or internally for the business?
So we ran out of mics. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So it's interesting. I think over the past couple of years, we've been on quite a journey at Smith & Nephew with this, and some people on the stage have gone through that journey with us. If you attended the last presentation, you would have heard a little bit about that journey. And I think it starts with that use case, right? I think that's actually one of the mistakes that we made, and Sarath, if you went to that other talk, you would have heard about it, right? We went in and just saying, we're going to use the tool no matter what. It's interesting. We actually have a pilot going on right now with Copilot. And there's really no end game. What's the point? Why are we doing this? And I think most people are seeing that it's being turned into an admin tool as opposed to something that can be used in operations, something that can actually be used in the production environment. And that's where we're really trying to drive that change. So interestingly enough, within Smith & Nephew, I think it's the quality drive when we look at poke-yoking, when we look at human error reduction, when we look at the data that we can get to then improve our processes. That's where the true value of it lies for us. And then understanding how to use that. You bring up CSA, validate versus verify. I think more people need to understand the difference between the two, including the agencies and the notified bodies, who will just throw out the term validation like it's candy. Once you start to bring that together, it does become just a risk-based approach. And so find that problem that's going to bring the company value, and then we can start to put together a plan and a risk-based approach to put it in place. And I think that gets you out of that wild, wild west, that proof of concept that never goes anywhere because no one wanted the concept in the first place.
Cool. Yep. And Cisco, I'm really interested in your perspective, right? Like, let's be honest, a lot of times in life sciences, we do things because that's what we think regulators want us to do, or that's what we think the regulations say we need to do, or is it just because we're used to doing things a certain way? So what's your view on all this?
That's an awesome question. And now being on the other side, in the beginning when we started a lot of this journey, we started with the idea that, okay, maybe we're not engaging with our audience. There's something going on there, clearly, right, with our stakeholders. We're not listening. We're not understanding the impact of what we're trying to do as a regulator, what they're having, and what they're experiencing on the other end. We thought, or at least I thought, foolishly, with all the work we did at FDA, that we kind of cleared some of that up. Let's engage, let's talk, let's collaborate. Being on the other side, you guys completely undersold the level of issues that you experience with the agency. It's been a 2.5-month experience going through an FDA audit thinking, is that really what we say when we come out here and doing things? There is a fear, right, that is actually driving a lot of the discussion even around the AI focus right now. You've got, and I don't know if it's the same at every company, but at least where my experience is, you've got executive leaders who are like, this is the best thing ever. Let's do it. Do it everywhere. Apply it. And then you've got the fear, the quality focus, all thinking, well, what's the regulator going to think? There is an opportunity here, right, because the regulator is just as behind the curve as you guys are, right? You don't want to get to the situation where they are ahead of the curve, right? That's been something that I've said. If FDA is the one setting the tone for you, we've already lost the message, right? That's not the way it needs to be. You shouldn't be afraid of having to educate them. They will come in. They will not know what you're saying. They will not know what you're talking about. It will be new. But you can't use that fear to hold up what might be a much better implementation, much better application for what you're looking to do or what you need to do within your organization. I know, Craig, you mentioned it a lot of time, but it always boils back down to what's the intended use, right? What are you looking to do with this tool? And oftentimes, I think we overcomplicate that idea of a proof of concept, what can be done, where is that level that we're comfortable letting the tool do the work, because we don't understand what exactly it is we want to get out of that tool and what we're looking to do with it. You mentioned the teenager analogy, right? Teenagers do great work, right? They can do a lot of stuff, but you've got to put them in context and focus, and you've got to double check what's going on with what's happening there. But they can get stuff done oftentimes much faster and better than most of us can, who are used to more, I want to say, not old-fashioned, but, set in stone ways, right? Something that's already been kind of established, because they're willing to challenge the norm, and they may find a better way. And I can tell you that there's opportunities, especially in the case of these pilots where people are using tools. Yeah, I like the co-pilot example. They don't know where it's going because they don't know what it's capable of. So everybody's just trying things at random, and that's okay, right? Just make sure you're putting the right guardrails and bounds around that and moving the needle in the right direction. The biggest piece I've seen from a lot of what these tools can do is speed, right? What they can get you, and they can get you to a wrong answer very quickly, but it's still quick. And sometimes that's better than delays and long months worth of effort to get to that same conclusion.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So I think it's especially important with the regulators so it's interesting in my background, I had a lot of interactions with FDA, but also with BSI, TUV, and their leadership. And you will see often a disconnect between the leadership of an agency and the actual inspectors. And so sometimes you have to help the burden that you mentioned, that they're trying to come up to speed. And it's funny because we would bring use cases, and in the end they would say, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm saying you need to convince me. And so if you think about how you do that, that's through those risk-based approaches. That's by helping them understand the difference between, and think about it, any medical device. How do you compare it to the state of the art? Okay, so if the state of the art is non-AI, is non-technology, how do I compare from a risk perspective? Take, for example, self-driving cars. If 1 in a billion self-driving cars gets in an accident, we freak out. Yet, I don't know how many people drove here this morning, but 90% of Massachusetts drivers should not have a license. Right? So that's comparing to the state of the art. You bring those types of things up and have a conversation with the regulator, as opposed to either being fearful of them or letting them drive the conversation, because they're in just as much of a state of disarray as anyone.
Yep. I was literally just going to ask that. I was like, what is the one thing that people can do to raise trust with regulators, to give them the confidence to innovate, to use these new tools? Like, again, it's usually out of fear that people don't do these things, especially in critical GMP operations. What is it? So it sounds like what I heard from you, which is very much in alignment with CSA and Val 4.0 and these things, is that if you're building your case around demonstrating decreased risk as it relates to product quality and patient safety, then that's your storyline, right?
And I think that's also what you need to convince your quality and regulatory partners of. Unlike Khaled, I'm an R&D guy who stayed at a Holiday Inn last night and got a job in quality. So I bring a different perspective. But I think we also have to help quality and regulatory understand that we're taking some of those aspects of how we develop products and applying them to quality systems and operations.
We're also very far away from removing 100% of human intervention for decision making and reviews and approvals, right? So you have all these use cases where AI can get you 60, 70% of the way there or polish the last 30%, right? It could be either direction. But we are at least, I would say, a decade away from completely removing the human component to a final approval of a quality record, of a manufacturing step, whatever it may be. And I think we're going to continue to see the needle being pushed in that direction where the human intervention component I don't want to say is going to be eliminated, but we're not there yet. And I think that that's a big part of the discussion with the inspectors if they are asking you about AI capabilities, functionality, what are you using it for? The AI, the human component is gonna be there for at least another 10 years.
And honestly, that should be the dominant factor, right? At least for a while, especially for a lot of these use cases. Unless it is a purely data-driven and it's just crunching things built for that approach, great. Most of the other things, it's presenting you information and someone's got to rationalize it some way, shape, or form, or accept that that information is accurate, right? And that, like you said, that's not going away anytime soon. I mean, all joking aside, I've used the tool to get to speed on even regulations and activities that you'd think I'd know. But, when someone starts calling it out and I'm saying, no, we can do this, and you've got a quality or a regulatory person resisting you, and I'm start second guessing myself, I'm like, well, maybe I don't remember that. Maybe that's not what was in the regulations. I got to go back and check.
ChatGPT.
Exactly. You get a quick check and say, you can train it. They've got capabilities now to do that as an extra resource, right? It's that extra knowledge base. It's the polishing on things. It isn't necessarily, and none of that, take that with what the context is, right? None of that says, oh, I need a super extensive validation approach to it, because I'm still the one who's got to process that and make the decision around that. So it is then an accessible tool that you could utilize and take advantage of, especially if you're working with groups who know how to use that, who know how to build that, to know how to actually turn it into something that is easily translated into a validated or assured system, right? That will be used to help inform decision making for broader, more risk affecting things.
So I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about CSA, which is the final guidance is out. Initially, when we started back in 2015, if you recall, it was called non-product software. Where did it end up today? Manufacturing and product software. And guess what? Between the draft in September 22 to September 2024, it included AI, SaaS, cloud. So what does that mean to you? The agency is basically says, go, explore, do things. We're allowing you, right? Don't think too much of the stupid documentation. No offense to my quality folks. I'm a quality guy. But
Those are not synonymous terms, quality and documentation.
No.
Correct.
Got it. However, we've always thought of sometimes validation as a GDP, task. It really isn't, right? You really need to understand what you're doing. So I think there are the opportunity now to accept AI as it's presented to us. It's okay, take a risk. right? Again, think about enterprise systems, right? Where is the direct impact to patient safety, product quality, and data integrity? Think about it from that perspective. And I'm gonna go back to 2015 when we talked about direct, indirect, and none. Think about the direct impact to that patient. Indirect, again, impact to patient. This is the only way you're gonna kind of uncuff yourself and be able to really open up to technology and accept it and drive it. One example, I definitely do recommend, a lot of you are hopefully moving away from any other manufacturing execution system and going to Tulip, and you're gonna do a lot of migration, right? There's tons of AI tools for migration, okay? Take advantage of that. Speed, productivity, cost, value. So this is really what you need to do.
And I think remember the difference between GXP and non-GXP, right?
Thank
Too
you.
often we think anything we create is GXP. It's not. If it's not making a quality decision and it's not part of the DHR, it's not. It's just an efficiency tool.
Correct.
So the only thing that needs to go to the level of verification and validation are GXP.
I like that efficiency tool.
There you go.
Another important piece of that, I think, is that we take a look at systems in whole. This entire system is GXP versus not, right? You have to take a look at it from a functionality perspective, right? There maybe is 30% of an ERP system, maybe GXP, depending on what you're using it for, right? That you take a risk-based approach and you can dive into what you need from a documentation and a testing and a CSA perspective for that chunk of a system. But it doesn't mean that everything else related to finance, as being another big component of ERP, you need to go into the level of rigor that you would an entire GXP system. So that's what we're considering systems, kind of business operations tools or GXP systems, but we're not necessarily wholeheartedly selling it as one or the other because there's always going to be a mix of both. The CRM is another great example depending on what you're using it for. So you really have to take a look at the requirements and the use cases, and if you're able to better distill what is GXP versus not, that kind of feeds into the whole CSA approach.
That's CSA right there.
Right.
One size does not fit all.
So I wanted to bring up something. You brought up CSA. There's also lots of different documentation, guidances, things that are coming out about AI that is kind of giving the feel that go ahead and use it. Try to give us the license to use it. I want to make a little bit of a counterpoint.
It's okay.
What about Annex 22? There's a for those of you that may or may not know, in Europe, the Good Manufacturing Practices just put out a new draft guidance specifically on AI. Wondering your thoughts on the current draft that's out there for comment.
Did you read it?
Recorded, right?
Yes, hopefully. We can send it in later. Who wants?
So there's there is a bit of a disconnect sometimes between the different organizations and how they're doing things and their approach. You've got to weigh in and factor where is some of the concern coming from, right? There is obviously a more conservative approach or thought through that than some of the things that we've said or what we've tried to do here within the FDA or what they've put out and what they're trying to do. Truthfully, end of the day, when you get down to it, it might seem more onerous, but there is a way to get to that same point in an easier and faster fashion, right? Because end of the day, it's all about demonstrating you're in control. You know your risk, you're in control, you know why you made your decisions. And this does not apply just to CSA or anything else. This applies across the spectrum to any bit or any part of the process, right? What is it that I'm trying to do? Do I know why I did it? Am I in control? That's it. There's a lot more words in the way they're approaching it from the Annex 22, but that, at least I've seen, they might put something out onerous like that, but as things build up and they learn, they're actually a lot quicker to adapt their models than they are here in the US, even with guidances, right? So I wouldn't fear it yet. I'd focus on putting the right comments in, telling them what's going on and what's happening or what your perspective is and how you think that other piece of control can be achieved, right? I think that's the piece where, as I mentioned beforehand, you've got an opportunity here. Do not let it be set by the regulator. You are supposed to be the experts in these systems and activities. If you let that expertise be the regulator, that's what you're going to get. And then you're going to be justifying that and fighting it for years. Let your expertise set the tone, provide the right feedback. What is that's needed? How are you going to demonstrate to them that you're in control and you understand the risk of what's going on? And most regulators will start to adjust and adapt, right, as they learn and they progress.
So it's pretty simple, actually. Just do the right thing. If you actually just do the right thing from the beginning by the patient, by your customer, and then you boil down, some of you may be familiar with different credos out there, J&J's credo, we have our own, but patient first. If you focus on patient first and you put the systems in place that focus on patient first, you're going to be compliant, or you're going to be able to convince the regulator that you're compliant. If you then walk down to the user, you're going to be compliant. Stop, as an industry, we need to stop focusing on being compliant and more focused on doing the right thing, documenting what we say, doing what we say, doing the right thing, and you will not have a problem with the regulator. It's when you try to work around the regulation and around the regulator in the name of efficiency that it becomes onerous. And what I always say is compliance is really, really simple. It's say what you do what you say. That takes no skill. The hard part, the quality engineering, is doing that efficiently. And so that's part of my job. Part of my job and quality's job and regulatory's job is to enable a business to do that efficiently. And if you're not getting that out of your quality and regulatory group, challenge them on it. But if you do it right, you won't have a problem with the regulator. If you focus on the patient, you won't have a problem with the regulator.
Now, let me throw a wrench in here. Because you've got the FDA, or the ex-FDA, and you've got EMEA, you've got Anvisa, you've got all these regulations, right? Every one of them, they're not on the same page, in my opinion, right? What is it doing to us? Confusing the heck out of us, right? Most of your companies are global companies, and they need to really kind of comply with all those regs, even guidances. I mean, Annex 11, we were just talking about it. It went from 10 pages to 40 pages. And all they're doing really is picking and referencing different guidances from GAMP and FDA, and it's like, are you like, why that redundancy, right? So to Siska's earlier point, we need to be the leader in determining really what we want to do, right? You know best your product, you know your customer, you know what you need to do, right? So focus on doing the right thing. The right thing, you're doing it, trust me. It's not an inspector that comes in, does not understand your product, and talking earlier about your product, holy crap. I mean, I don't think any inspector, they will just, what do you do? I'm sorry, I'm not gonna mention your company now, but anyway, my point is, there's so many guidance, so many things coming out. FDA released an AI guidance, right? EMEA did. Again, how do I comply with all of them? Well, again, it goes back to the guardrail, to the controls. It doesn't matter. AI, at the end of the day, it's a software. It's a system. Somebody wrote it for us. Whether it's written by itself or wrote it for us. Now, the fear is when AI knows exactly where I live and knows my wife's name. ChatGPT knows my wife's name, by the way. I asked her, my wife is ill, and she has a fever. Oh, I'm so sorry for Hala. That was weird. So this is really what we need to pay attention to. Security, right? There's a lot of things that we need to worry about than the regulators at this point. So I think guardrails really need to be in place.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna ask one last thing and then open it up. I expect there to be a lot of questions, so I wanted to leave enough time for that. One of the things we haven't said explicitly, but I've heard it throughout, is culture.
Yep.
Even at Tulip, when we're trying to drive quality culture, when people say, "Oh, for our inspection or our audit," I'm like, "Oh no, it's not for our audit, right? Like we're doing these things for our customers and for." Their customers and things like that. So it's really important to drive a quality culture. I think what I've heard today here so far is we need to keep that in mind, use some critical
Absolutely.
thinking around how we achieve regulations. So I guess my question is, if there was one piece of regulation or framework, regulation framework that you could change or inject, what would it be? I know it's
That's your opportunity,
little
Cisco. Go for
untangling.
it.
The entire MDR?
yeah. This is for anyone.
There's so many.
Free for all? No.
Or I could let you think about that and open up for questions.
I would actually be curious what the audience thinks.
Yeah.
I can talk loud.
Please don't be shy.
I can share.
No, I've never been known for being quiet.
Okay.
So this is actually getting recorded, so we're going to talk into the mic.
Do you hear that? Okay.
There are no questions.
So thank you so much for giving the overview. I guess my question is, so Tulip is enabling a lot of these new AI technologies, and we're seeing more things are coming on the roadmap, and so obviously we're very interested in taking advantage of those. A lot of the compliance parts probably going to come down to what is the data that you're feeding in around what is the impact, right? So that's for us to be thinking about. But is there anything that Tulip's doing as in like a toolbox for having conversations from a compliance perspective or with security teams around potential questions they may ask if we then say, okay, we're going to expand Tulip to use these functionalities? Is that something being developed?
I'm not exactly totally sure where you're going with that, but when you are chatting with a chat widget or things like that, I mean, that is contained in your instance. Right? And so I think all the security frameworks that apply, like our SOC 2 and, for example, apply there. So from that perspective, these things are contained within your instance. I'm not exactly sure what other risks you are.
It's more around just the documentation of that, right? So it's fine to have a conversation and say, yeah, it's within your instance, but it's more like we need more concrete details around how all of this is working, what are the guardrails, so we can have better conversations internally within our companies to say, hey, look, we're going to open this up, not just there should be some things, but more like here is a technical white paper that lists for this functionality, this is the guardrails in place, this is where the data lives, this is the retention, those kind of things. Just something to think about to help us with those conversations, okay?
Agreed, yeah. And a lot of the new feature sets that we shared today, and we kicked off, we launched, we told you about, are things that are going to be coming in our regulated releases in probably LTS 16, just speaking in terms of LTS, because he said by the end of the year, LTS 15 will be out in the next month or two. So we're talking LTS 16. That is definitely one of the things that I already have a paper of documentation around what our position is on how we follow our SDLC, for example, and what are responsible ways of using this, and human in the loop, not human in the loop, how certain features, some features are part of app development. The first one Mason told us about this morning was building apps, right? Creating an app from a PDF, say. That is something that has human in the loop. It just does by nature of it. You have the approvals and things like that. That's something my position on that, our Tulip position on that would be that's something that you could use without diminished control or with increased risk, right? Things that would be used in runtime or via player are things that maybe we want to have a little bit more testing around and how that might impact, right? Because there are less downstream controls. So that is something that we are currently working on for sure. So I appreciate your input on that. And even if you had specific concerns or let's talk about it, right? This is a collaborative environment. We build software for you. I want to make sure that people are going to be using these tools. They are going to be better for the patients ultimately.
If I could add one extra thing, right? It's one thing to say, and it'd be great if Tulip would offer that, but they can't anticipate every scenario that you're going to encounter and what's going on there. But that idea of coming up with that playbook, right? That idea of how end of the day, I'm making these changes, and I need to be able to respond to a regulator and show them why this is accurate, right? And I say that because I just went through this process internally the same way, right? The biggest resistance was nobody understanding what do I say to the regulator. And if I can put together, here is specifically why I say this and what's going on, and people know this is what I mean, this is the data I've got to support it, it goes a long way to that change effort internally, to adopting any new process, new technology, and what's going on. You can work with a partner like Tulip to get to some of that stuff, but a lot of that might sometimes come down to you having to develop that playbook internally yourself too, right? Because it makes a big difference when you can sell it and say, this isn't just something Tulip handed me. I know what it means for my process, and that's a different dialogue that you'll have with the regulator at that point in time.
I would say, generally speaking, even broader. I'm now working with different parts of the business at Vericel, and I went from speaking with one potential AI vendor every couple of months to like 3 of them a week now. And it is anyone can call themselves an AI firm, and any company can call themselves an AI company at this stage, right? Never heard of them, but they can, and they email, and they try to contact you, so on and so forth. The biggest challenge, actually, is working with some of the other parts of the business, like marketing and legal, when they are interested, they've been pitched some sort of AI technology. It's outside of the realm of GXP for the most part. But they don't know how to interact with these AI companies. They don't understand how to put together high-level business requirements or high-level user requirements to be able to satisfy potential use cases at the end of the day. So I've gone out of my way to have sessions with these, classically non-GXP portions of the business to explain to them, and using ChatGPT to essentially build out what their user requirements are for AI capabilities. And that is the only way. Otherwise, it's like performing a root canal on the different parts of the business, right? But it's the only way for them to really understand the level of effort that they need to do, the homework they need to do in advance to even build out what they're looking for, what they're trying to solve, because they will go and talk with these AI firms and they will not get to what they're looking for at the end of the day, or they'll be sold a bad bill of goods at the end of the day as well.
So I thought of an answer to your question.
Oh, go for it.
So if I had my one dream ad to every single regulation, this goes back to my comment of meeting intent and doing the right thing. There's an art to writing a procedure. And we talked about compliance is easy, do what you say what you do. But there's very rarely in anything that we do one way to do it, and that one way is right all the time. There is usually an intent behind a procedure. There's an intent behind a regulation. And if I had one ad, it's something that we actually add, and I've added for a long time to procedures that I write is, and I'm trying to think of how to put this, but deviation to the procedure, deviation on the way that it's prescribed in the regulation is allowed with justification as long as it's meeting the intent of the regulation.
I like it.
And that would solve so many problems for us, because we have these very myopic ways of thinking when we're sitting down to do something, and we forget about the fact that the world is dynamic and what we do is dynamic, and that there's very rarely a singular approach to everything. So and it's interesting, because to your point, right? So I sat with the notified bodies and the interpretation of the MDR, because they were just as confused as everyone as to how to implement this thing. That's actually what it boiled down to. So we had agreements, actually, some of the companies had agreements with the leadership of the notified bodies as to how we would interpret the MDR with the intent of it versus the letter of what was written in there. And so that would be my one ask of every single regulator, is to go drive more towards intent. This is what MDIC was trying to do with Make CAPA Cool. Drive more towards intent and less towards the actual words that are in there.
Yeah, back in my days with Baxter, we used to call it planned deviation. And it worked. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Actually, if I could build off, because I think that's a great one. I was trying to figure out, when we started CSA, the one that we said I would have loved to have done or adapted, I would have gotten rid of 82070i. Right? I think that's done more damage to what potentially could be done than what it's happened now. But I think that notion of building into the reg the idea that you must go back and revisit your procedure and make sure it's still lean and effective versus just a hodgepodge of add-ons based on observations. Go back and revisit that and see. is it really meeting, going back to that intent portion, what's going on? And having the investigators actually check for that so that they start to become aware, hey, we need to drive that improvement mindset. We need to drive that mentality versus just create a checklist and follow your checklist, I think would be something that'd be a phenomenal add to regulation. I don't know how it'd be executed fully, again, but I think it could happen.
AI.
AI.
Yeah, AI for sure. I
AI.
think one thing that I liked in the Lilly presentation earlier this morning, it was one of the first steps before even digitize was optimize, right? Like there you go, get rid of all those add-on, the death by kappa, and get back to what's actually intended. Any other questions?
Hello. So almost all of you touched upon doing the right thing, right? Which we all agree upon, right? Michelle, you also mentioned as long as you're doing better, right? As long as it is better than what we currently have, right? Sometimes there are situations, right? Say from a quality point of view, is there a problem with the current quality system? Absolutely not. Are you worried about the quality? Absolutely not. Right? Are you worried? Is the AI going to be better? Absolutely yes. It's an example of it. Visual inspection, attribute visual inspection, right? So when we are going to AI for attribute visual inspection, right? Is that going to be better than my current visual inspection? Absolutely yes, right? Do I have a problem with my current visual inspection? No, right? But it's going to be better. So how do we go around from a compliance point of view showing that?
To demonstrate it.
Can I comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Can use some exercise.
Or I can
I wouldn't go around it. And don't strip me.
I know you're about to rip it off.
So I would go right back to the regulations on enhancement versus adulteration. So use the right words and it's really important to start from that point. I'm not in an adulterated state. I'm in a state of compliance, and I'm doing an enhancement to my system. That is allowed within the regulation and allows you to put in quality plans, not CAPAs.
Love it. Yep. Well said.
Just with the right justification at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the other piece to note is nowhere in the reg does it mean the expectation is to go from here to absolute zero over here in improvement. And the idea of driving improvement, that's actually built into the thinking, the concept, it's in the preamble, right? You should be able to move and progress to something that's a little better, even if it's a little better than what it was before. And that should be part, again, as you talked about the justification, that needs to be built into the justification. Now, is that going to guarantee you that any investigator, any auditor is going to acknowledge that? No, but that's where education comes in. That's where a discussion comes in. And at the end of the day, whether it is an auditor or an FDA investigator, remember, it is their observation. After that's done, you still get to make your case broader and kind of state your position to another set of eyes, another set of reviews that goes from there. But it is a process, right, of when things, especially with AI, are changing so quickly, it is a process of education, adoption, and getting them familiar with what's happening. And that does take time. It could be frustrating. It could be very annoying to have to deal with and do it every single time. I know that's your situation, but it is the reality of it. Doesn't mean you should shy away from it if you're doing the right things.
One more question?
So I know that the guidance today cover AI under software, like the CSA one. And if an organization implements a new software, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to inform the FDA of that. Do you see that the same case applies for AI, where we don't have to inform them of our utilization?
Yeah, depends on the product. And just an FYI, the final guidance replaces a section 6 of the GPSV, which we all followed for years in 2002. Unfortunately, that GPSV was never updated, right? So instead of updating that, we, the FDA, the agency, and the industry put together the CSA guidance to replace it. And why was it called CSA? I'm going to let, well, you can answer that or we can.
We could talk about why it was called CSA, but it basically
Yeah, but we're
was
not going to
because
go there.
everybody was so stuck on validation that the only way to get them to pay attention was to change the word.
There you
Really,
go.
that complicated.
Literally.
That was it.
John Murray actually came up, John Murray, who wrote the GPSV back in 2002, came up with the word assurance. So technically, we knocked down the V and added the A for assurance. And that was what I call today the sexy word, right? The sexy word for GAM 5 second edition. GAM 5 has always said the damn thing, but with all due respect, the industry did not listen. So we had to call it something else to attract people and lit the fire. And that's what happens. So you're really doing the same thing, you're just doing it different.
Thing to look back to, I think, goes back to the idea of what are you changing, what's your intended use, right? A lot of the focus from FDA and even a lot of the regulators is on the use of AI as a product or in support of a product, and that's a higher risk application. The problem is waiting for them and absent anything else, because that's where their biggest focus is right now, you're losing a lot of opportunity to kind of leverage the tool in a lot less risk situation and use it for much potential, get more familiar with it, and go from there. Now, that doesn't negate, or the guidance doesn't negate the fact that there may be, depending on your type of submission of your product, some submission requirements, right? If you're a PMA and you change something in manufacturing, you've got to notify the FDA through a 30-day notice. 510K or, a class 1 device. No, you're making the changes and you're documenting the record within your quality system, and that's perfectly fine, as long as it's not something that's in the product or as a product, right? So it's, what is your intended use? It always goes back to, how are you using this tool and what are you looking to do with it?
So just like was said before, don't overcomplicate it. It's no different than the material. It's no different than anything else. Follow the same decision matrix and you'll come to the same conclusion.
And for that, working closely with regulatory is very important as well. Some changes to systems may be annual reportable as opposed to a submission on its own, right? So having a really strong, I don't want to say just a CMC regulatory partner, but someone in your regulatory department that can help plan that out, I think is really important too. And we've had to do that for manufacturing execution systems, right? We've had to do this for LIMS systems as well, depending on what we're using it for. But having that strong partnership with regulatory to be able to help guide you, I think is critical importance for that.
Okay, I'm going to close this time out. You guys can come ask questions. We can talk later. But I first want to thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your perspective. You all bring a different perspective, but seem to have concluded on some of the same topics. All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.